What is going on, Pretender here, back with another Honkai Staro guide, and today I'm here with some of the best teammates you should be preparing for Castorice. This video is going to be breaking up into 3 different sections. First, I'm going to be starting it up with some of the best Harmony supports, or just supports in general you should be preparing for her. Followed by that, I will be talking about some characters that are not as good as the first section, but are still definitely usable. They won't be as good, but they are still options you will be able to use. And then the third sections will be taking you over a few sustained options that you would want to use, because Castorice is someone you definitely want to be having a healer with. So I'll be taking you over some of the best options you would want for the sustained portion as well. Do note, this video will only be going over her role as a hypercarry DPS. This will not be talking about Mide or Blade at all, so this will not be a dual DPS setup type video. This will be just going over supporters, debuffers, and also sustains. Yep, that's all I want to say. Before I get into the video, if you guys found this video helpful in any way, shape, or form, dropping a like would be greatly appreciated. If you're new or haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe and turn on the bell icon for future videos like this, along with all the types of Staro content. Starting it off with the absolute best teammate that Castorice does indeed have would be none other than Tribi. All the buffs that Tribi does provide is super good for Castorice, especially since we don't have a dedicated HP scaler, which Castorice is. Tribi is the next best option for that. In her base kit, she does provide all-type rest pen thanks to her actual skill, and in her ultimate, she can let Castorice or just anyone attacking in that zone when her ultimate does go up to do additional quantum damage, and on top of that, enemies in the zone will take 30% increased damage. And another big plus side is Tribi herself is a very nice sub-DPS, who is able to get a follow-up every once the ultimate goes up pretty much, because every time you use the ultimate, it refreshes the duration, but when someone else uses an ultimate, she will proc a follow-up attack. And especially with all the buffs you would have active, especially if you do have other characters that are buffing everyone rather than just Castorice herself, the damage that Tribi can rack up is very nice. On top of that, we do have some earlier investment onto Tribi, such as one of the most broken dupes in the game being Tribi's E1, which now gives access to true damage when she does have her ultimate up. That would be a massive increase to Castorice's damage thanks to the fact that you are now also dealing true damage. So at the very end of the big attack that Castorice would do, you would get that instance of true damage that does damage based off the original damage, and it's just a very big jump in damage. If you do also have her signature light cone, that is also a really nice DPS increase for Tribi herself, and also gives your entire team more crit damage, which is really good if you are pairing her with someone else on the team that also gets buffs based off their own crit damage, such as practically other characters I'm going to talk on this. But if they also buff based off their crit damage and they get the buff from the light cone, that's going to further amplify the buff as well. And on top of that, Castorice herself is also getting the crit damage buff that Tribi's light cone provides, so that's even more damage you would get out. So the all-type rest pen, making enemies take additional damage, making enemies take more damage, having the sub DPS potential, and then gets so much stronger with early investments. Tribi is the best option you can use. One of the other best options is actually RMC. The buffs that RMC provides is also very beneficial to Castorice herself, being able to increase everyone's crit damage based off their own, providing another turn so you can actually give Castorice with the Memo Sprite another turn, and also give them access to true damage. Theirs actually does work differently from Tribi's, because Tribi's happens at the end of the instance with Castorice herself and her Dragon Memo Sprite. The attack you do hits a lot of times, and for every instance of damage is where the true damage would proc. So instead of getting a big true damage number at the end, you would just get it for every instance of damage you do. So besides practically lagging the hell out of your device, you are getting a big damage increase at that. On top of that, you have the access of buffs in their Eidolons, because the RMC is a free E6. E1 increases crit rate for anyone that does have the mem support, so that's also going to be really nice for Castorice as well, as she is also a crit DPS. So already having a really strong base kit, and on top of that having free Eidolon, makes RMC one of the other best options you can use. And another one of the best options is going to be Sunday. There is one big issue that prevents Sunday from being the best partner for Castorice, and that is because of how she plays with recycling the actual Memo Sprite, because once the Memo Sprite self-destructs, that actually messes up the ultimate buff that Sunday would put, and would actually make the buff run out. So you always can't really have the ultimate be active on Castorice in the Memo Sprite, unfortunately, but the times you do, the ultimate increases energy, which is useless unfortunately, because Castorice does actually have a different energy type, but the crit damage buff based on his own is going to be very good, so the times you are able to have it off is really good. On top of that, his skill gives 30% damage now, and if the person you are buffing does have a skill, it gets boosted by an additional 50%, and he has the ability to buff Castorice herself and the Memo Sprite at the same time, and on top of that, give both of them an action, which is also really good and something that the other action forward giving characters don't have. On top of that, his talent when you do use skill increases crit rate, so 20% crit rate for free is extremely extremely valuable. And so everything he provides is once again just super valuable. Again, he would be the best if it just wasn't for the fact that his ultimate keeping it up on Castorice is very, very hard, since her playstyle of self-destructing the dragon is actually very anti-synergistic with how it all works. Although he does become significantly better and actually becomes a better option than RMC if you do own his E1. Thanks to his E1 providing such a big amount of defense ignore on its own, 16% for the character you do give it to, and then if they have a summon, it will be 40% for that summon to deal damage, and this defense ignore is proc by a skill. His skill does not have an issue with Castorice at all, since you will be constantly using it on her, so you are constantly able to keep the defense ignore on her, and it being up to a 40% defense ignore for her summon is why it's so valuable, because that's a high value on its own, and you usually want defense ignore to be a higher value to be more noticeable, and so it becomes very, very strong on its own. And if you have other sources such as having Castorice's Lycone, it becomes that much more stronger as well. So a E1 Sunday becomes one of the other best options you can use. Even at E0, he's still an option you can use despite the ultimate issue, but with E1 he becomes so much more better to use with Castorice. And if you do have his Lycone, he becomes skill point positive and you get better buffs you can apply, so that's another thing you can consider. So Sunday at E0 is one of the other best options you can use, thanks to the fact of how he works with the skill. Again, unfortunately, he does have the ultimate issue where it doesn't work properly, so you will have to deal with that a bit, but another plus side is if you do have his E1, he's still one of, if not tied for the best option to use. Now for the second section of this video, so as I mentioned at the beginning, this part is going to be talking about characters that are not as good as the characters I did just previously talk about, but they are still some great options you can use. And to start it all off, I'm going to be talking about these characters at the same time. It's going to be the options you would be using if you didn't have someone like Sunday, and that is going to be Sparkle and Bronya. The problem with these two is you don't actually buff Castorice herself, but rather you will select her Memo Sprite, because if you select Castorice, the Memo Sprite is not actually going to be getting the buff, so you have to buff the Memo Sprite, as the Memo Sprite is going to be the main source of damage, which is where Sunday also has another upper hand, because not only is he giving Castorice an extra turn and the summon, he is buffing both simultaneously, while Sparkle and Bronya can only buff one or the other and also give them the full buffs of one or the other with the turn. So you will have to select the Memo Sprite for using either of these characters. Bronya gives a full turn, so that's something you don't have to worry about tuning too much. You still want to make sure you do tune correctly and be sure to account for any buffs in battle, whereas Sparkle is a bit more difficult because she has a 50% action advance rather than a turn, so do pay attention to your tunings battle to get that sorted out. But the buffs they do provide is still nice. Like Sparkle's skill does provide a big amount of crit damage, so that's going to be fantastic. And on top of that, her ultimate and paired with her talent provides a good amount of damage dealt as well when it comes to Sparkle. Whereas Bronya's ult is the one that gives everyone crit damage on the team. Does give it an attack buff, but that is going to be useless for Castorice because she is HP scaling. Thankfully, that is not the biggest focus of her kit though, so the crit damage buff is the one that scales off her own crit damage as well. And again, her skill gives a big amount of damage dealt to the person you are buffing as well. On top of that, Bronya just existing on the field gives everyone 10% more damage, so that's also nice. Sparkle also will be increasing attack thanks to one of her bonus abilities, but again, you would ignore it because Castorice does not do damage based off her attack. Both of these characters are pretty easy to cycle all as well, as you can practically always have them up too. Sparkle also providing a bunch of skill points is going to be beneficial as well. You may run into skill point issues with Bronya, so definitely be sure to be in mind of your skill points when you are using her, because you obviously want to make sure you have enough skill points to actually use the Bronya skill on the Memo Sprite to get the Memo Sprite to attack, whereas Sparkle, she'll practically gen you enough to the point you don't have to worry about it. So these two are not as good as Sunday obviously, but they are still fine options you can use and will still get some good damage out of the Castorice summon. Another option you can actually use is Ruan Mei. She isn't as good as the other supports I did mention, but she's still very much usable, because she does provide a big increase to damage dealt, which is going to be really nice. She also does give weakness break efficiency, which is a bit anti-synergy because you don't want to break enemies, because if you break them, then you won't be able to get attacked. And since the whole purpose is to lose HP or heal, that's going to be something you want to look out for. But for the most part, you could still ignore it because it's not going to make it to where they're always broken. They still will be able to attack you a lot. So a big damage dealt increase, which further gets amplified if you do hit the break effect threshold, providing weakness break efficiency, also providing speed, which could be good for your other teammates, not much so Castorice, but rather other teammates. And then in her ultimate, providing all type rest pad is just super beneficial. And if you do have her E1, that's also going to give everyone 20% defense ignore when her ultimate is up, paired with Castorice Lycon or paired with something else such as Sunday E1. The defense ignore stack is going to be very, very nice, and a high defense ignore, as I mentioned previously, is going to be a lot better than a low defense ignore. So E1 there is going to be really nice. Even with E1, she doesn't become super broken and puts her as the best units you can use. She's still a option you can use, but not better than the other ones I mentioned. In any case, Chibi, RMC, Sunday, and often Sparkle and Bronia will always just be better, but that does not mean Ruan Mei is bad. If you do also have Ruan Mei's Lycon, when you do use it all, you're getting an extra 24% damage, so that's another way you can amplify Castorice's damage even more, which makes Ruan Mei another good option you can use. These next two options are going to be more on the debuff supportive side, so rather than actually buffing Castorice and her stats herself, or giving her another turn to attack, you're going to be lowering the enemy stats, such as making them take more damage or making them have vulnerability to make Castorice just do natural more damage. And the first one I want to talk about is Jiaoqiu. So at base, Jiaoqiu is able to make enemies take more ultimate damage. Ultimate providing the zone where enemies will take Ash and Rose stacks, which will help with this talent, is good. Unfortunately, the vulnerability to be taken increased ultimate damage that you do get from the ultimate is a bit wasted. But the talent is the one you mainly focus on, which is going to make enemies just take general more damage. Starting at one stack with 15%, and then each subsequent stack will increase that by 5%. Ash and Rose gets stacked at 5 and lasts for turns. So with one stack, you start off at 15, then you get 20, then 25, and then 30, and then 35, and that would be the max. On top of that, it's really easy to get ultimate with Jiaoqiu as well. So if you are pairing him with someone like Chibi, let's say you just don't have another action advanced giving character on the team, but you have someone like Chibi that can get Chibi more follow-up attacks as well, and is practically always very easy to keep up his ultimate in battle. You can also put a more supportive set on Jiaoqiu for his planar ornaments, which can further buff Castorice depending on which one you use. So that's another little extra buff you can get from that as well. If you do have some investment on him though, such as having his S1, where you now have an extra debuff that can make enemies take more damage, and even further increase that by upgrading that state to cornered state to make them take even more damage, that's going to be making Castorice do more damage as well. Or if you also have his really good E1, which would make allies do 40% increased damage to enemies that do have Ash and Roast. So the forms of investment you do have on him there makes him that good. And since he is the Hildy, you can also just use Pearl's Lycon, which is really good, as we do know, giving 60% free defense shred at S5. That would be another option that you can make Castorice do more damage by running Pearls on Jiaoqiu like that as well. So that is another option you can use to make Castorice do more damage, since the defense shred would increase the damage you can deal to those enemies that are ensnared. And so Jiaoqiu is another option you can use. Now the next debuffer option is practically a great slot, and if you are lacking another better option to use, is just Pela. Not really much to talk about when it comes to Pela, but her 40% AoE defense shred is just super valuable. Very easy to cycle ultimate on her as well, which is another good thing. And as I mentioned with Jiaoqiu, you can actually just go ahead and run Jiaoqiu's Lycon on Pela if you do have that option, or you could also just run the Pearls Lycon, as I was talking about, on Pela as well for an increased amount. So the options you do have as a slot in for Pela is another good thing, which is why she is actually another good option to use. Now this last section with sustains is going to be a lot shorter, but it's mainly because it is pretty simple. There are two really good options and one other good option that isn't as good as the two first ones I'm going to talk about. But the reason this is going to be shorter because the simple solution is you need to have a healer because you want to be healing the dragon so you have more HP to consume, and you also want to offset the HP drain casters do. One of the two best options is going to be none other than Luocha, as when it comes to pure healing, he is one of, if not the highest output of pure healing, and he also does have offensive healing once you do have his field up, as now anyone attacking is going to give HP to the entire team, as it is a restore that everyone will get. You also practically never need to skill with him, so that's another big plus side. So he's also just another SP gen you can do, but that is practically all there is to him. The other best option is Gallagher, who also does provide the same offensive healing, as you do just need to attack the enemy that does have the besotted state. Gallagher is another also very fantastic SP genner you can use, especially since his ultimate does give him another turn. Just know to properly use him, you definitely want to have his EQ so he does have a cleanse, because healers without cleanse is very yikes. I mean, just look at Bailu. Bailu would be crazy if, she just had a cleanse, but here we are. Now the last character I want to talk about is going to be Linksha. He is not as good as Luocha or Gallagher for Castorice, but is still very nice. She has AoE cleanse, which is really good, and then the output she can get for Fuyu on healing is also very good in itself. The only reason she is not as good as Luocha or Gallagher is because Luocha and Gallagher both have offensive healing, where you can actively constantly just attack enemies and heal back, so so the amount you would be healing is just constantly going to your team or the dragon that you would need to get more HP on, while Lingsha does not have a field or a zone or just a debuff where that would be happening. And the healing you get from her is her summon Fuyuan acting, or using her skill, or using her ultimate. She still heals a lot to the point where it's still really good, and she is by no means bad to use with Castorice. She is just not going to be as good as Luocha or Gallagher. But once again, she is still a very good strong option you can use for your Castorice. As again, her healing output when she does attack is really good. It's going to heal a good amount. She has AoE cleanse, so if you get hit with something where multiple units on your team do get stunned or whatever, she's able to cleanse that. That is one thing the other ones do not have, so that would be one advantage you can actually have. And she can also generate SP points just as fine as well. A good thing to consider is if you do actually have her light cone, that's going to give her access to the wolf-free debuff, which will actually let enemies hit by her ultimate take 10% increased damage, which will benefit your Castorice's damage. And if Lingsha herself does have 150% or higher break effect, that becomes an extra 8%, giving it 18% increased damage, which once again will increase Castorice's damage. So that's a good investment option you could consider, and would also be another benefit you would have over the other two. When it comes to Gallagher specifically, you can actually put the Slycone on him, just because it is his best option as well, since you also build him with Break Effect. With Luocha, not so much, because you don't build him with Break Effect. So Gallagher actually has the advantage of having this Slycone on him as well, if you are able to do that. Otherwise, you just keep it on your Lingsha and you will be good to go. Yep, that is the video. That is the best teammates and slightly better replacements you can use if you don't have the best options for Castorice. Once again, hope you guys found the video helpful. If you did, drop a like, it would be greatly appreciated. If you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe and turn on the bell icon for future videos like this, along with all the types of style content. That's all I want to say. Peace out.